So you might have heard a little bit of the rumors about Turinabol, or maybe you haven't, but what I'm here to do is hopefully give you enough context as to maybe move forward with your use of Turinabol, and ideally get some of the confusion about Turinabol cleared up and why, more importantly, it's not being used in bodybuilding near as much as it might have been used in the past. Now, the reason I'm presenting you this video in this specific way is because there has been some folks on the internet saying Turinabol is a waste of time, as well as also extremely liver toxic. So I dug through the research and tried to find every anecdote from every person ever who has used Turinabol. I also looked at the history of Turinabol in its depth and tried to find every study and case study there is to get more evidence on essentially what are the mechanics of Turinabol. What is the kinetics of Turinabol? Why is it not widely used, and why are some people citing that it's extremely hepatotoxic? Now, don't get me wrong, I think oral compounds are the god of pre-workouts. Besides heartbreak, that's a completely different tangent, but oral steroids certainly do more for you than virtually any compound could. If you could like encapsulate heartbreak though, and like put that shit in your anus, an hour on the stair climber would be 0. Like it'd be nothing. It could be, you can do that shit into infinity and beyond. But anyways, oral steroids are the best in class pre-workouts. And honestly, in my opinion, for many different types of athletes, not just bodybuilders. Right now, bodybuilders love to abuse things like D-bol, Anadrol, Winstrol, Anavar, a tab here and a tab there. And by the way, YouTube, I don't condone this. This is just for educational purposes only. However, the one that people just seem to not talk about anymore, and personally, the one that I've had some of the best experiences with, is Turinabol. I know many fighters who love to use it on a regular basis, as well as many strength-based athletes who also really enjoy Turinabol. Before I get into a deep dive about the mechanics and stuff like this, I want to give you maybe a little bit more of a background in the history of Turinabol. And its actual name is one that's far too long for either you nor I to care to remember. I am just going to put it on screen right now. Putting it on screen right now because I can never ever say this. I'm going to try for you one time and then we're moving on. Chlorodihydromethyltestosterone. It was first produced by a company called Genapharm in eastern Germany, and obviously, if you guys know the lore here, it's pretty crazy. This was way back in the 60s at the height of steroid manufacturing, the good old days, the golden boys. This is when we wanted to be alive, but unfortunately, we were born a little too late in 2024 with all of the feminism and believe it or not, Turinabol actually maintained use within medical establishments from 1965 all the way to 1994. So this had to be really good compared to its competitors, right? Most of which were off the market by the time that Turinabol was just getting off the market. So this is where things get a little bit crazy in Turinabol's history. And I think this is completely different than almost any other compound that we have to study this current day and age. And it's going short for CDMT. So if you ever want to research Turinabol, you have to type in its full name and not necessarily Turinabol because nothing will come up. A lot of people think they can search in like Google Scholar and get effects from just searching in D-bol, but that's not D-bol's name. That's just the bro name for it. Same thing with Primo. People will search in, you know, Google Scholar or Sci-Hub or any of these different publications and type in Primo. That's not actually the compound's name, and you won't find much for it if you just type in Primo. But back in the day, this was administered to approximately 10,000 Eastern German athletes. This was a part of a secret doping program to ideally get the Olympic gold medals all day long, baby. It was known as the State Plan Topic 14.25. And these athletes, unfortunately to them, often had no idea what they were being dosed with. They were given what they thought was vitamins. Just handed a pile of vitamins and said, take these, and unfortunately, some of those turned out to be Turinabol. I actually think all of them did, because 10,000 athletes is a very large number. Of course, this was way back in the day where morality was kind of out the window. You could do whatever the fuck you wanted in society, basically. If you had a government and an authority, you could have your people do whatever. And in this case, they gave them oral steroids. Sounds like a pretty good government to me. I don't know. This was 1968. Believe it or not, this program remained in place until 1989. This drug single-handedly played a role in numerous world records and gold medals, how many of which we honestly have no clue because the testing methodology back then was mute. But seeing as Anavar was first introduced in 1964, it's interesting to note that the Germans didn't just use Anavar, and instead they formulated an entirely new compound. Why would they select T-ball over something that had a ton of merit already? Did T-ball have more to offer in their testing? I'm sure a government that has the resources that an entire country does wouldn't just make their own compound if they didn't have one already that was highly effective. So why did they just stop using the things that were available and instead generate their own compound? Well, in a lot of testimonies from people, and there's no written or spoken word that's on record from this kind of stuff, just sort of he said, she said, it's because it worked much better in terms of performance-based outcomes. What they saw was that inevitably, from taking Turinabol, people were able to run faster and run longer compared to taking another steroid where they could run faster, but inevitably their cardiovascular performances would come to a stop. Why has it gone? Where has it gone? What happened to it? There's not really a detailed history on this stuff anywhere. I have a couple ideas and some stuff I'm going to talk about more on later, but for the most part, here's what I could gather. T-ball was formed in a foreign country on a secret basis. This kept the chemistry relatively secret compared to most compounds that were open for use. Two, because of this, T-ball didn't really catch popularity like other oral steroids did in the West. And because it's coming out later, there was already mass productions of other oral steroids, and these companies based in China, for the most part, to be honest, didn't care to cut into their profit margins by creating this new drug that no one was really asking for in the first place. And three, those suppliers also knew that it would really cut into their capital if they purchased and formulated this Turinabol, and in the end were not able to sell stock because no one was interested in taking it, because again, what had just been proliferated through all history was Anavar, D-ball, Anadrol, things like this, especially at the price. Because it was such an obscure compound, the Turinabol price would be sky high in comparison to something like D-ball. And back then in the 1980s, the D-balls were the king, man. Arnold loved his D-ball, and I don't think he would have traded for Turinabol even if they had the chance to. Now, developing a little bit further into this situation, this is something I actually brought up to the crew on the Anabolic Bodybuilding podcast, because again, I wanted more perspective on it. I've done a lot of research at this point, talked to a lot of people, as I do, and those of you who follow me may know how much I talk to the audiences that I do have, and I consider you guys a great resource. Let's just listen to what was said here. Question for everybody: what happened to Turinabol? Why is it like not widely used? And it seems to be something
super toxic,
wildly effective.
It'll come back around.
I can give you like the lab stuff you want. They analyzed all the people in Germany that used it, and there were like 14,000 deaths from it. Jeez, I wouldn't touch that crap with a 10-foot pole.
It goes in cycles too. It was huge like 2004, 2005 when was it British Dragon Labs was really pushing it. There was like a year or two where everyone was raving about it, and I feel like maybe 4 years ago, I was seeing it all again. It's like every 10 years or so, it comes through. All it takes is one person.
Okay, so there we heard Kurt say that basically it is extremely hepatotoxic, and up to 14,000 people died using it. Now, I love Kurt. Me and him are very good friends. We talk on a very regular basis. This isn't a video to besmirch Kurt. This is just a video talking about the objective information we have available on Turinabol and what I came to find out going through that objective information from you guys, resources online, and most importantly, studies and case studies provided from publications. I know we talked already about the German study and how there was only 10,000 roughly athletes. There wasn't 14,000, and those athletes didn't see massive impairment or deaths. They did believe what they were taking was vitamins. That's true. They were misled into taking anabolic androgenic steroids, but there was no consequential deaths that I could find because of that. What I did find though was this really interesting case study, and this is super applicable for us. A 35-year-old man that presented with intertesticular sarcoma or a form of cancer. Essentially, he had testicular cancer, and the patient, upon arriving to the hospital, had admitted that he had taken T-ball for 5 years. Now here's where things get really interesting. I'm going to read word for word from this study. The patient reported a 10-year high-performance weightlifting career in the former German Democratic Republic as a cadre A athlete participating in international championships. Starting at the age of 18, he received a systematic high dose of Turinabol during a 5-year period in the late 1970s and early 1980s, with the peak doses being around 20 tablets per day. The patient was informed by his physicians about the applied substance and noticed considerable side effects such as gynecomastia. However, he continued to comply with the medication because he was afraid if he was not to do it, it would end his career. Furthermore, the patient reported that the medication was discontinued only immediately before competitions. Scrolling down a little bit further, Turinabol was given especially to weightlifters in very high doses, exceeding 10 grams per year in some cases. It was available in 1 to 5 milligram tablets. In the current study, peak doses of 100 milligrams per day were taken according to the recollection of the patient and having as many as 20 tablets per day. In view of these data, high-dose androgenic anabolic steroid doping could have played a role in his testicular cancer, although it's also certainly possible that this could be a coincidence, essentially. So here's the important sauce. There was no indication that he had hepatic damage. There was no indication that he had any sort of existing problems outside of having gynecomastia and presenting with intratesticular cancer of some form. So this is really, really interesting, right? Like, we're seeing an actual person here who took 100 milligrams of Turinabol a day for presumably what was close to 5 years. And no mention of any hepatic dysfunction, no mention of any cholesterol issues, no mention of any cardiovascular issues, but just a mention of some testicular fucking cancer, which sucks. So look, based on what I have read, what I have heard from you guys, what I have seen as a coach, I kind of have my own opinion on this thing, and it might differ from a lot of people out there. T-ball is amazing, and I love it. I love to use it. If you've ever had real T-ball, you probably share a very similar experience to me. The reality is it could be used to gain muscle pretty efficiently just due to its ability to give someone pretty much raw strength accrual within a 2-hour window. It could give you some pretty substantial strength gains in an off season when you have the cushioning to support an excessive gain of strength, which therefore could induce obviously more mechanical tension, favorable to muscle mass gain. And when you have your background anabolics in, like testosterone and other variations, of course you're going to be hyper anabolic, so the excessive damage you cause by taking Turinabol is only going to contribute more to your development of muscle mass. It's of course also estrogen neutral, so the profile doesn't exert any sort of excess estrogen, which I thought was interesting because in the case study we just viewed, this guy talked about Turinabol having given him a bit of gyno, which he admitted in that case study as well, that they also would take testosterone propionate very, very close to their show, or event rather. They're not bodybuilders. I would believe that it was likely the high doses of testosterone propionate that caused the issues as opposed to the Turinabol. If you can get real Turinabol, I highly suggest you give it a run. See how you feel, see if you like it. And if you do, let me know down in the comments below. Add to my little case study here. I personally think that there isn't any drastic differences within its process of liver metabolism. I think that hepatically speaking, it's pretty equivalent to all other oral steroids we've seen. And sure, if you abuse it, it's gonna fuck you. But if you use it normally and pretty much how it would be prescribed in any other oral steroids use, it should be fine. And I think, like I said, most of you would probably really enjoy it. But if I'm wrong, tell me below. Did I miss some information? Is there other things that I didn't touch on which are extremely critical? And you should subscribe to the channel while you're down there. I will see you in the next video.